Hello and welcome to my channel, Mad Knitting. My name is Susan. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and this is episode 42. It is July the 2nd, 2023. And if you're a regular viewer, you may have noticed that it's been a little bit since I've posted a video. I think my last one was at the very end of May. So I went through the entire month of June without recording. That wasn't really intentional, but life gets busy, work got busy. At one point or another, the whole month, I had one family member doing something fun out of town for a whole week at a time, except me. Everybody but me got to do that. So it just, a lot of irons in the fire, and I just didn't get a video made. I have, however, been knitting a lot, so I have plenty to show you. If you're new here, I live in Madison, Wisconsin. I live with my husband and 2 teenage kids, and I work from home. So normally I make videos during the workday when I have kind of a slow period and I can afford to take a little time in the middle of the day. That has not been the case lately, and today is actually Sunday. I'm just honestly procrastinating some other things I have to do by making this video because I just wanted to get it done. Anyway, the content here is mostly knitting, about 90% knitting, but I also throw in other crafts when I do them and whatever else I feel like talking about. So sometimes I bring up current events, sometimes I talk a little bit about what I'm reading, just kind of depends what I'm in the mood for. So I will say that the month of June was just a lot kind of globally, right? For all of us. There was a whole full docket of Supreme Court decisions that came down. Some of them were good, like upholding the Voting Rights Act and upholding the Indian Child Welfare Act. Some of them were pretty devastating, like the ones that came through this past week. So I don't have any expert commentary on those things, but it's just been a lot. Like when there were like 3 bad decisions that all came down within like a 24-hour period, that was kind of rough. So anyway, okay. I feel just a little out of practice because it's been a while. So, and I have some quick and dirty notes here. The other thing is that it has been really warm and dry here in Wisconsin, and a good chunk of the country has been under air quality alerts at one point or another over the last week because of the wildfire smoke that's coming in from Canada. And here it was so bad that there were 2 days where I couldn't go outside. I don't have any conditions that make me especially vulnerable to bad air quality, but I think the index for a couple of days was close to 300, which is dangerous. So that was rough. It kind of knocked me down, to be honest. I was feeling pretty sluggish and had a headache, and even with not really going outside, it was affecting me. So hopefully that clears up soon. I don't know. Seems like those wildfires are going to be going for a while. Okay, let's talk about knitting. I have finished several things. It's a lot of smaller things. So I'm going to start with hats. I have 3 hats that I have finished since I last made a video. The first is my most recent Polka hat. I'm going to show it to you all undone. None of these, by the way, have been blocked because I just haven't done it. This is a very generously sized one, and this is one I started a while ago, so I've showed it before. This was like concert knitting, work meeting knitting, just something I would sort of pick up and put down whenever I had something else to pay attention to but needed my hands to be busy. And I finally finished it on a trip to Minnesota a couple of weeks ago. We were doing some college visits with my son. So I finally got it done there. Although in Minnesota, it was like over 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And this was, if it was anything bigger than a hat, I'm not sure I would have been able to stand it being in my hands. Anyway, it's a pretty generous size. That was on purpose because some of the This is the 5th Poca Poca hat I've made, and some of the previous iterations I have found that I wanted a little more of a brim to turn up. That's just my preference. So this is how I did it. I really like having the fuzzy part on the inside. It doesn't make me itchy at all, and I find it very warm and soft. So the outside layer is a discontinued yarn called Mountain Colors Barefoot, which is so nice. I'm pretty sure that, so this was left over from another project. I'm pretty sure that I made socks for one of my kids when they were really little, so there was quite a bit left. And it's just this beautiful sort of black, I think, going to navy and kind of this bright sort of midnight navy. There's plenty of it, so I made the hat plenty long. And the lining is Knit Picks Aloft in the color black. So the only real challenge I would say was knitting with the black mohair silk yarn. It was really easy to skip stitches or drop them. So I just, that was not quite as mindless knitting as the sock yarn, which is very easy to do without really looking or thinking about too much. The sock yarn has a little bit of mohair in it, which makes it extra warm. So this hat is going to be great for the cold winters we get here. The only thing I did different from what the pattern says is that I think when I cast on, I think what happened was I was going to a high school band concert, and I had literally about 5 minutes to grab a project before we left. So I didn't have the wherewithal to do a provisional cast on. So I just cast on regular long tail and picked up the stitches later. So you can see there's a little more of a, I don't know how well it's showing up in this dark yarn, but if you felt it, you'd feel almost a ridge. It's not quite as seamless and clean as a provisional cast on would look like, but it doesn't really matter. And actually the way this is behaving, I don't know if blocking will make it relax, but the way this is behaving, it kind of wants to roll at the edge anyway. So that cast on isn't really showing. So yeah, this is a Poca Poca hat. I suppose I will keep it because I really like it, but I don't know, I have enough hats. I have a lot of hats. Almost too many, which is kind of hard to believe living in Wisconsin where, you know, it's hot weather for a good chunk of the year. Here's another leftover, all the hats I've been making lately are with leftover yarn. So here's one, I think I've showed this one too. This could use a good steam to kind of even out the stitches, but it is, I did not use a pattern for this. I just picked some yarns that I wanted to use up, cast on, and I did 1 by 1 rib up to the top, and then the 1, 2, and then I did 4 point decreases for the crown. So this again has a very generous deep brim, which is what I like. It is not tight at all. This could easily be stretched out to fit a little bigger head. I think my head is 22 inches around, which is pretty much like an adult medium. The yarn I used is Ultra Alpaca by Barocco, the worsted weight in this lavender color. It is left over from a sweater that I sort of collaborated with to make for my mom. I had talked about that sweater before and showed it before, but just to recap briefly, she had started it and actually started over a couple of times because it had a complicated cable chart and she was getting frustrated, and then I offered to make it for her, at least make the main body for her, and then she did the sleeves. But in the meantime, the yarn from when she had knit and reknit so many times was looking pretty worn and fuzzy. So I didn't want it to go to waste, but it was looking too worn out to use kind of on its own. So I paired it up with a purple mohair silk blend. This is again Knit Picks Aloft in the color Eggplant, I believe. Just because I figured worn fuzzy yarn paired with purposefully fuzzy yarn. That'll just kind of hide all the fuzziness, and it'll all be part of the project. And sure enough, I think it turned out really well. I've got quite a lot of that ultra alpaca left, and I think I bought 2 skeins of the purple, and I did not use of the aloft, and I did not use up the entire first skein. So I've got plenty left to make a matching pair of mittens, which was what I originally intended to make, but this again was something I needed to just be able to cast on and knit without dealing with increases or following a pattern or changing needle sizes or anything like that. So another finished project, and eventually there will be mittens to go with this. The third hat that I finished, I had not even started this the last time I made a video. This was done in just a few days. I showed off another hat that I made using leftover wool scraps. So this is using leftover 100% wool yarn in worsted weight. I think it's mostly Knit Picks wool of the Andes. I know the gray is. I'm not sure about these other colors. But basically what I was trying to do is use up some worsted weight in small amounts in these colorwork hats. I'm not sure what I'll do with them, if I'll keep them or give them away or whatever. But they're fun to do. So that's my approach now, is just making them for fun, and they'll find a home eventually. But I've been picking colors that I like together and then finding charts in the Strange Brew Book by Tin Can Knits. This is kind of an all-purpose color work how-to that is really intended for sweaters, but they've got all these charts in the back that you could use for any project that you want, I suppose. So anyway, I just found some of the simpler, smaller stitch count charts and used those to make this hat. So I've got this charcoal heathery gray that's left over from a cardigan I made for my dad, a paler gray, and then this kind of light pink. I don't even know why I have this pink. I obviously used it for something because I only had part of a skein. This is not my sort of pink, but I think it looks nice with the gray, and I like how it's like a second light colored contrast color that you know, I thought combined nicely with this pale gray. So again, this needs to be steam blocked, and I think the stitches will even out and look even better once it's steamed. And this one came out just a little bit on the snug side, but I don't know, it still fits me. I like it. I'm happy with it. I keep forgetting. I'm gonna go back and tell you what needles I used for all of these things, because I always forget to share needle sizes. Just in case you're interested in doing a similar project, you might want to know. So for this hat, I cast on 96 stitches. I used a size 6 needle for the ribbing. This is just 1x1 rib. I really like having a cuff to fold up, and I had plenty of the gray, so I did that. The main part of the hat, for rows with no color work, I used size 7 needle. That's my standard go-to for worsted weight yarn. But I always have to go up 1 needle size for color work because the tension, I think, having this stranding behind the stitches just pulls it in a little bit. So I always go up to one size. So in this case, I used a size 8 for all the rounds of color work, and then went back to size 7 for the solid part at the top. I didn't want to try to work color work into decreasing, so I just have these bands. So that's what I did for this hat. For the purple ribbed hat, pretty sure I cast on 80 stitches, either 80 or 88. I don't remember, but I used size 8 needles. And I got kind of a big loose gauge with that. For ultra alpaca, for the main yarn on its own, I would normally use a size 7. But since I had the mohair silk paired with it, I went up to a size 8 just so that it wouldn't be too dense and tightly packed. So that's what I used for this hat. And then for Polka Polka, this is fingering weight yarn and it calls for a size, I forget what size it calls for, but I use a size 3 to get 7 stitches to the inch. And I'll be honest, I did not measure my gauge, but the way the hat fits, it tells me if I was not getting 7 stitches to the inch, I was getting pretty close to it because it does fit very nicely. Okay, so those are 3 of the things that I have finished. I have 2 more projects and they are both birthday gifts. One is quite a bit late and the other one is actually done in plenty of time. So I'm going to show you the one that's done in plenty of time. I've showed these before. This is a pair of socks for my little brother. Little brother, he also has the biggest feet of anybody that I knit for. So I was trying to be proactive and get a good start. These are very similar to a pair of socks I made my dad for his birthday, but I chose slightly different color, same yarn, different color, and I adjusted the stitch count because of foot size. So I used Knit Pick Stroll Tweed. This is all I've got left of the 2 skeins that I started with. This is the color Prussian Heather. And as you can see, it's a really nice denim blue. And the tweed flecks, some of them are kind of large and chunky, but they're both beige and like a light tan, which I think is really nice. And to add some interest, I striped in a little bit of the color Oyster Heather in the cuff, which I did for my dad's socks too. For this pair, I did a better job making sure the stripes were symmetrical. I think for my dad's, I had a little more of the dark color before I started striping in. And so, I mean, he loves them, it's fine, but this kind of worked out a little bit better for my sort of symmetrical, loving type A personality. And I'm really, really pleased with how this turned out. I'm also really pleased with how well the joins worked in the color striping. I'm pretty sure this is where the beginning of the round is. I don't know if it's showing. And I don't think you can really tell. I don't think you can really tell. There's not much of a jog, if any. The way I do this, and I've described this before, but the way I do this is when I am ready to start a new color, I use both the old color and the new color for the last stitch of the previous round and the first stitch of the next round. So when I'm ready to start on the oyster, the last stitch of the round with the blue, I will work a stitch using both colors. And then the next round, which would be the first round of the lighter color, I also use both of those yarns together. And, you know, in this case, since I have 2x2 ribbing on the top, it meant I was purling one stitch with 2 colors and then knitting the next stitch with 2 colors. And maybe that helped too, since it wasn't just straight knitting, but I think it worked really, really well. So there you have it. Don't know how well it's showing up, but I did an Eye of Partridge heel flap. And I do, yeah, it doesn't want to show up, but there's a small ridge of garter stitches on each side, which just makes it easier to pick up the stitches for the gusset. And then I make my way down to the toe. For these socks, I cast on 80 stitches, because like I said, he's got kind of big feet. And that's what I've done in the past, and those have fit him. I hope they're the right length. If not, he'll let me know, and I do have some yarn left in case I need to make them longer. I'd be surprised if they're too long, but it's possible they're too short. So anyway, his birthday is later this month, so I'm pretty excited that I actually got them done in time. The final finished object I have to show you today finally got this thing done. I finally finished this gnome. Oh my goodness. This was a labor of love. The pattern is Here We Gnome Again. It's by Sarah Shira of Imagine Landscapes. And it's a brilliant pattern. All of her gnome patterns. And I've made 3 of them now. The original gnome pattern I've made more than a dozen times. What is it called? I can't remember the name of it, but I'll put a note at the bottom of the screen and make sure I link it. And then there's another one I made last year that has like a little backpack with a tiny gnome inside the backpack. Can't remember what that one's called either. And then this one, Here We Gnome Again. And what made this one take longer than anticipated is that it's cabled. Of course, that is gorgeous. I love it. But you can see there's this cable panel that goes up the hat. It's purposefully not stuffed all the way to the top so the hat can kind of bend down. And then there's a different cable pattern. You can see it better on the back here that goes down the body of the gnome. Now, I love cables. I love textured knitting, but every single stitch in these cables is a twisted stitch, which looks really, really good. It's also a pain in the ass. For some reason, I do not love working twisted stitches. I think because it's just so much slower than regular knitting, and because I cannot cable without a cable needle if I am using twisted stitches. I have to have that cable needle. Otherwise it doesn't work for me. So it just felt like it took a while. It was fun. It's a very fun, engaging, well-written pattern, but it took a while. Needle sizes. Oh my gosh, you guys, I keep forgetting. The socks, by the way, I always use size 1 needles on regular fingering weight sock yarn. Okay, size 1. Anyway, for this, the yarn is worsted weight. She gives you a couple of options. I decided to make kind of a larger one using worsted weight yarn. This is Barocco Lannis in the color Evergreen. I don't know what I used for the beard. That's just a little bit of leftover cream. Maybe knit picks, I'm not sure. But the green, this is leftover from a sweater I made for my daughter. I had at least a whole skein left, so I knew I would have plenty. And I think it looks kind of festive in this color. So the hat, I believe I used size 6 double pointed needles, and for the body you go down to a size 5. So it's a pretty dense fabric, which is good for something that you're gonna stuff. Yeah, normally for worsted weight yarn I wouldn't be using needles that small, but I think it worked out really well. So it was fun to do. You start with the brim of the hat and work up, and then for the body of the gnome you pick up the stitches from right under the brim and work down. And then you start decreasing, and at some point you have to stop and stuff it, and then finish the decreases on the bottom. And then you do the beard and arms separately and stitch those on. So I want to talk for just a second about how I stuffed this guy, because maybe it's not a guy. Maybe it's a girl gnome. I don't know. I'll talk for a second about how I stuffed this gnome, because that was she had some suggestions in there that were really good. So for the top, I just used, you stuff about halfway through the hat, about half of the hat, and I used leftover like K-Pock, I think it's called. It's like this natural latex stuff that they use in pillows sometimes. And we have a couple of old pillows stuffed with that we don't use anymore. So I've washed those and saved them to use for stuffing. So I'm like never gonna run out of stuffing because I have like 2 whole pillows worth. Anyway, so I used that in the hat. And then I knew I wanted more weight for the bottom. And for that, again, I used stuffing from an old pillow. It's actually stuffed with buckwheat hulls, which are great because they're natural and they have a little more weight than the fluffy stuffing, but they're really small little pieces of things that can get everywhere and might also work their way through the knitted fabric, even though it's a dense knitted fabric. I just didn't want that to happen. The person this is intended for has cats, no small children, but you know, you don't want like little pieces of stuffing coming out of anything, even if it's not like a hazard. So what the designer suggests and what I did is to cut off the bottom of a pair of pantyhose and stuff them in there and just tie it tight and then put the whole thing in the gnome. And it worked brilliantly. It was so much easier than trying to put just loose buckwheat hulls. I mean, you can do this with poly pellets too, or whatever you find. But it was so much easier than working with those loose and then, you know, trying to close up the last decreases without things getting everywhere. I did have a pair of pantyhose in my drawer. I don't know why. I don't think I've ever worn these. They don't look like they've ever been worn. I hate, like, I'm fortunate that I don't like work in a corporate environment or, you know, have a situation where I have to wear anything like this. So I don't even know why I have it. It might have been that I bought a package for the purpose of like making felted wool balls for the dryer, because I don't know why I would have this to wear. So anyway, it's missing one foot because I used it for stuffing. I've got another foot to go, and I could probably, if I stitched this close or tied it shut or something, I could probably get at least another worth out of each leg. So it came in handy. So this is meant for someone whose birthday was in May, and it's just shamefully late. But I think they'll appreciate it regardless. I think it's amusing to kind of do this to cross the arms. So the gnome looks a little indignant. Because isn't that how many of us are feeling right now about a lot of things? Just disgruntled, right? And this is called Here We Gnome Again. So seriously, again, here we go again. Okay. I think that's all the social commentary I'm going to make today because there's a lot. And, you know, if I started going on about that, this would be way too long and we don't want that. And I think it's pretty clear the position I take on most things. And, you know, I think it's important to be open about that, but I also don't need to go on and on and on about it, especially things that I feel strongly about, but don't necessarily have like detailed expertise in. So we're just going to leave that there. Okay. I do have, how many works in progress do I have to show? Just 2, because I was really trying to get some things finished and buttoned up, and not having quite so many projects on the needles, because that can make me feel sort of scattered and all over the place, which I'm already feeling in like work and music and stuff. I just have a lot going on. So I'm going to show you 2 works in progress, the 2 that I have to show you. And yes, okay. So the first is a plain sock. Surprise, surprise. I'm almost done with it. I'm on the toe decreases here. I started this about a week and a half ago, and I did most of this at that event. So I was at that event, like, you know. So I went, there was a 2-day summit that I was participating in for work. It was local, but for, you know, these 2 days, I was like at this place off site, away from my email, which was kind of nice, and listening to speakers. I spoke for one thing, and, you know, the rest of the time I was just, you know, listening or participating in discussion. So I had a lot of knitting time. So I decided to just bring a skein of sock yarn and cast on something new. So I have BFL sock, so Blue Faced Leicester. It's treated as superwash. And I think there's some nylon in it, but this is hand dyed by Kathleen of Republica Unicornia. I bought this a while ago and I'm finally knitting it up, but it's got a lot of fun speckly colors. I think I picked this because I really wanted to try the BFL and see how it feels in socks. And so far I really like it. So it's got like, you know, it's got kind of Barbie colors. I'm not sure what's come over me. But you all know I will wear anything if it's on socks. Like there's pretty much no colors that are off limits when it comes to socks. But there are streaks of magenta and lighter pink and purple. And I think the basic background color is just the natural BFL color, which is sort of a more yellowy side of cream than you often see in natural wool color. So it's very pleasing. I'm very happy with it. I'm making these socks to fit my feet. I don't know if I will keep them or pass them along, but I'm going to remember this time to tell you, size 1 needles. I cast on 64 stitches. I'm making these like I make just about every sock, especially that has, especially socks using yarn with a lot of color patterning. In this case, speckles. So 2x2 rib cuff, plain stockinette for the rest of it, heel gusset with an eye of partridge heel. Maybe you can see it better on this. A little bit of a ridge, garter ridge along the side of the heel, which makes it easier to pick up the stitches for the gusset. And on we go to the toe. That's how I do all my socks. So I'm really happy with this. This is good like work meeting knitting. So like at that summit, I got a lot done. If I have a lot of Zoom meetings and things coming up, I'll get a lot done. But it just kind of depends on what my schedule is like for work. Lately, it's not so meeting heavy, but I have a lot to do. So that's been a little stressful. That's okay. One thing I would like to mention about this before I go to the next work in progress is that one of the reasons I chose this was because of the colors. The reason I chose this yarn at this time for this project was because of the colors. Because they fall into they qualify for a knit along, make along, it's not just knitting, hosted by the Yarniacs podcast, which I've talked about before. But in case you don't know about it or if you're new here, the Yarniacs is an audio podcast hosted by Gail and Charlene. They live in California and they've been doing this podcast for about 10 years, which is pretty remarkable. And they've got one of the most welcoming, supportive, but also very real and honest forums on Ravelry, at least that I've been a part of. And I just really enjoy, being there in that online community. One of the knit-alongs or make-alongs that they host every year is called Colors of Fall. And it's a very laid-back thing to participate in, which is one of the things I like about it. But it's also got really fun, the parameters they do set are really fun. So first of all, it runs from the June solstice through the September equinox. So you've got 3 solid months just within which you can hopefully start and finish a project. And they post all of the color palettes that Pantone releases for both London and New York for the fall, winter, and spring, summer color palettes. So there's 4 sets of colors that Pantone has put together for fashion or something. I don't really know. But so that covers both hemispheres, whether you're moving through summer into fall or moving through winter into spring. And there's so many to choose from. They always have a series of like bolder colors, distinctive colors, and then a set of neutrals. So in order to qualify for the make along, you basically just, something in your project has to have one of those colors in it. even if you have to squint to tell, they say. So I'm pretty sure that the range of pinks and purples that are in those palettes are represented in the speckles in this sock. The only other kind of rule for this make along is that for the finished object thread, or whether you're posting on Ravelry or sharing on Instagram, you just have to style it somehow. So for these socks, I would have to wear them in some kind of outfit. Or if you don't want to show yourself wearing something, you can just do like a flat lay, show how you would wear it. If you're making something that's not an article of clothing, like if you're making a blanket or a pillow cover or something, just have it styled somehow. It's pretty, there's a lot of possibilities there. So it's a very, very fun thing to participate in. And when you have a large stash, as I do, it's a fun way to try and narrow down the possibilities for the next project that I want to start, right? So if I'm looking at those color palettes and thinking, okay, let me pick something from there, and that will help me decide what yarn to use for whatever project I want to make. So that was behind my, when I was looking through my tub of sock yarn, that was behind why I picked this out. Okay, the other project that I started just last weekend, and it's one of these potato chippy things that I could not put down, is this. This is a sweater that I am making for myself. And I think just about every one of the colors in this, if not all, most, are in those color palettes. By the way, I will provide a link to the color palettes both on the Pantone website and the forum thread where somebody pulled them all together and put them in one post so you can see them all together. I will provide links to those in the description box below this video. So this is called, you can see all the ends hanging out. This is called the Porty Cardigan. It's by Gudrun Johnston. And it is a cardigan that requires a steek. So that's what's going on in the front here with these kind of funny looking stitches. This will be cut down the front and folded back or something, and then there'll be a button band of some sort. I haven't really looked that far ahead. I'm just following directions. And this color work is just so much fun. It's like potato chip knitting, like I said. It's so much fun to see the pattern unfold that you just kind of keep going. Just one more, just one more. This calls for 4 contrast colors, and I am using 4 contrast colors. I did not follow the sequence, the color sequence in the chart exactly as she laid out. I was just kind of eyeballing it to see what I liked, see what I wanted, what colors I wanted next to whatever I was using at the time, but I'm pretty happy with how this came out. So the yarn I'm using, again, this is Barocco. It's Lannis Light. So they have a worsted weight version, this light version, and then I think there's a bulky also. And the gauge is kind of interesting. It's fine weight. There's 383 yards for 100 grams. And it says that you should get between 22 and 24 stitches over 4 inches, depending on your needle size. And when I swatched, I did not really like how the yarn felt at that gauge. I've even got the swatch to show you. I used a bunch of different needle sizes. So this swatch, it hasn't been blocked because I'm lazy about that. I do yarn overs to show the needle size. So like here at the top, these 3 holes show that for this portion of the swatch, I had a size 3 needle, and I really liked the fabric that made. And for that, I was getting 28 stitches over 4 inches. That's 7 stitches to the inch, which is much closer to like a fingering weight gauge than a sport or DK. I don't know, it's not that you couldn't do it at a larger gauge, especially since this is not superwash yarn, so it won't it shouldn't stretch out. It should kind of fill in, but I just like the feel of this fabric. I tend to like a firmer knitted fabric rather than loose. I feel more secure somehow, like it's gonna wear better and not lose its shape. Generally speaking, that's what I prefer. So the Porty cardigan really is a fingering weight pattern. Anyway, oh yeah, I was saying Lana's Light. So this is the color Fog. This is the main color I'm using. And I don't remember the names of the other colors, but I will show you what I've got. I have this, please focus. There we go. This is sort of a mustard gold, verging on olive green. I have kind of a heathered red, light red color. I have this light blue leaning teal. I think of this kind of as a robin's egg blue, actually. And then this dark one, I think it's, when you look at the whole project, if you're not looking real close, it appears to be brown, but it's really a dark maroon, dark burgundy color. So I'm really quite happy with how they work together. I sailed through the yoke because, like I said, it's potato chip knitting. And then once you split for the sleeves, it's just plain stockinette the rest of the way down until you get to the bottom. So I don't know how long this will take because it really is a pretty fine gauge, but I am quite enjoying the process so far. I think there's a little bit of color work on the sleeve cuffs. We'll see when I get there if I feel like doing that. I don't love doing color work on double points. I'll tolerate it for mittens, but like on sleeves, ugh, it's just not my favorite thing. But I haven't tried it on, but I'm, the gauge and stuff, I think it'll probably fit. I hope. Plus it's a cardigan, so there'll be a little bit more, added to the front. So those are my projects. They both qualify for the colors of fall. I think that I know this is gonna run long because it's been a while and I have a lot to share and talk about, but I would like to just share about a couple ideas I have for stuff coming up. I don't often do that because I tend to make plans and then not follow through or have too much stuff and it just takes a while to get to it. And you've probably noticed I've announced here like, oh, I'm gonna make this or this, and it hasn't happened yet. It's because I have too much yarn. I don't have as much time as I think I do. And I changed my mind about what I'm making. So hopefully these things will happen. Maybe not. I do have one project I just realized I need to run down and get some supplies to show you, but I'll start with what I have handy. So one thing I would like to do is use up, or to the extent that I can use up, the rest of the yarn that I bought in Iceland last year. A year ago, exactly now, we were in Iceland for a family trip. We were away for 2 weeks, and except for when we all got COVID, it was a wonderful trip. And the only souvenir I brought home, other than some chocolate from the airport, was 4 skeins of yarn that I bought at this beautiful little shop just off the ring road. Icelandic wool. This is what I have left. I made a pair of mittens out of the blue and gray for my son. He cannot wear them because they're too scratchy even for his hands, but my husband likes them and he uses them. So I need to make my son another pair of mittens to make up for that. And the orange and black, this is a natural color. It's just really, really, really dark, nearly black. I made a pair of mittens for my daughter, which she does wear and likes. And I've talked about those before. Maybe if I can find pictures, I'll throw them in here. But I actually really like how these 4 colors look together. And I think what I would like to do is I would like to make a polka hat using this yarn probably big color blocks or stripes. I don't want to do anything elaborate. And I'll have to adjust for gauge because this is really a DK weight yarn. And that Polka Polka hat pattern is for fingering weight, which means I should probably count on making the circumference just slightly more generous, just because thicker yarn means that you'll need a little more room with the lining and everything. But because the yarn is kind of scratchy, I thought that a Polka Polka hat would be a good way to address that, because I'll find something. I'm sure I have something lightweight and very soft in my stash that would complement these or match one of them that I can use for the lining. So that's my plan. And then this won't just be sitting there wanting to go to waste, because it's pretty special yarn. The natural colors were not too expensive, but the hand-dyed ones, understandably, were quite a bit pricier. So I really don't want them to go to waste, and I think that would be a nice way to to have a memory of that trip in another knitted item. So that's one plan I have. And I would have to go back and look at those colors of fall, but I'm pretty sure this blue is in there and the gray probably is in those neutrals too. Not sure about these, probably. So that's one plan I have. Another plan I have, this is kind of the Republica Unicornia show now. I have some other of her yarns that I have purchased and really want to use. So that BFL sock, another reason that I wanted to use this in a pair of socks was to give it a test run, see how I like it. Because I have a sweater's quantity of it in this gorgeous red color. The colorway is named Red Velvet or Red Velvet Cake, which is not my favorite cake. There was one year for my birthday, 2 people made me red velvet cake and it was fine, but like if they'd asked what I wanted for my birthday, I wouldn't have said red velvet, but that's okay. It was still good. The color though, this is my favorite color. This is the best red, I think. So I want to make a cardigan out of this. And I have found a few patterns that are possibilities, but I haven't totally settled on one. This is hand-dyed yarn, so there's going to be some variegation in it. It's also kind of a dark color. But because there's slight variegation, I don't want anything too patterned. I did find a couple of cardigans by Marie Green of Olive Knits that just have sort of a simple, really pretty cable pattern going down the front. So I might go with one of those. But reading through, looking at the projects and reading through some of the comments, it seems like some people love the way her patterns are written and some people found it very confusing. And I haven't done one of her patterns, so I don't know. I also want to say one of the challenges for me in finding patterns that work for fingering weight yarn is that most of them, it seems like, are at a gauge that I think is too loose for the weight of yarn. Especially when it's superwash yarn. This is superwash treated. I really don't like a looser gauge. I think it's going to lose its shape. I don't like the feeling of it. And because it's superwash yarn, it's not going to fill in the stitches. It's just going to look kind of holey, and I'm not sure it's going to wear well. So I swatched with this, and the gauge that I really prefer with this yarn is 7 stitches to the inch on a size 3 needle. That's kind of how it usually goes for me with fingering weight yarn, that gauge. And that's the fabric I like, and that's what I would like in a cardigan. And there are not many out there. So yeah, if any of you all out there have experience with her patterns, please leave an honest review. Let me know what you think. I've been knitting for a while. I can probably figure out whatever, even if it's a little unclear, I'm sure I can figure it out. But that's kind of where I'm leaning now. But if you have other suggestions, please let me know. Because I just, 24 stitches, 6 stitches to the inch, like that's just, I don't like how that feels. I don't like the fabric it makes. And it's just hard to find patterns with that tight gauge. So that's one plan, or that's another plan. Another set of Republica Unicorny yarns I showed these on a special episode where I was going through the stash I have collected to make things for my little nieces. I have these two, I don't know what the colors are, but they're based on My Little Pony, I think, and they're just bright, cheerful pastels with all kinds of other colors speckled in. This one especially just is kind of a riot. And for each of these, I have 2 skeins, and what I would like to do is combine with plain undyed yarn. I think this is Cascade Heritage that I got when a store was going out of business. And my original thought, and I think what I said at that time, was to hold these together to make a DK weight and do this really lovely pullover pattern I had found. The problem with that is that my little nieces live in Virginia, where they don't get as much cold weather as we do up here. And they're also little kids who tend to run hot. Like, they don't want to wear lots of warm sweaters and jackets and things, typically. So I'm thinking instead what I will make is the Tuck or Took hoodie cardigan by Gabrielle Dansknit. I have made that pattern before. It's really good, and it's at the gauge that I like. It's 7 stitches to the inch for fingering weight yarn. And I've got, with the 2 skeins of each color plus the plain, I've got plenty. But I think I'll just make that hoodie and stripe it. And it's also a cardigan. So that means that between the lightweight yarn and the fact that it is open, I think it'll be good for kids who, maybe don't need to bundle up as much as I do. So that's my plan with these. And again, I've been wanting to use this forever. I think, my goal is to get these things done by Christmas. So I'll have to size appropriately. By then, the older one will be close to 8 years old, and the younger one will be like 5.5, closer to 6. So, and they're both very tall and slender. So I will keep that in mind for the sizing. But my goal is to get them done by Christmas. My stretch goal is to get them done for the colors of fall. I'm sure there's a color in here somewhere that goes with those palettes. So that's a lot of plans, honestly. And I have one other sweater planned. So I'm gonna run and grab a skein of the yarn and the pattern, and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back, and I bumped the tripod that my phone is in. So if the angle is slightly different, I think it might actually have straightened up a little bit. That's why. So, okay. So many plans and ideas, you all. Who knows how much I will see through. But anyway, all right. So I kind of did a mini review of this book when I got it. I don't remember how long ago that was. Sometime in the last year, I think. I got this book shortly after it came out. It's called Contrasts, Textured Knitting. It's by Mayu KP, who is a Finnish designer. It's published by Lina, which is not my favorite for a lot of reasons. They tend to have a lot of errors and be a little bit snooty, and there's no like download code, so this physical copy is the only way I can access these patterns. That said, the designs are gorgeous, and I really like this designer. And one of the things that's been holding me back on making anything out of here is that I can't decide what to do first. Nearly every one of these I could easily see myself wearing and enjoying making, because there's a lot of cabled work in here. But I have some yarn. I'm flipping through and trying to find the one. There's also like a lot of patterns in here. So it's a hefty book. I have this yarn that I got from my mom. I think she purchased it to make something and changed her mind and didn't want it hanging around, so she offloaded it to me, and I'm almost always happy to take yarn. It's a pullover that I'm looking for, and I know what it's called. I'm pretty sure it's called Reflections. Yeah, here we go. It's the Reflections pullover. So here's one of the pictures. And I think it's called Reflections because those cable patterns mirror each other on the front of the sweater. And I have to show you this one picture on the Yarniacs forum, which I guess I'm a walking billboard for the Yarniacs too. This picture, I'm going to cover the pattern, of the model has us all cracking up. None of us can quite figure out what the thought process was. Like, who sticks their hand up through the neck of a sweater and walks around like this? So the idea is that whenever somebody finishes a sweater, we've called it the pose. You should stick your hand up through the neck and just pose that way. It looks kind of silly. I don't know. Silly pose or not, I love the pattern. It's, you know, got cables. It's got this turtleneck. You can opt not to do a turtleneck, but I might anyway. I mean, what's not to love? And this is the yarn. This is the yarn that my mom did not want. So I've had this for ages and ages because I couldn't decide what to do with it. I've got plenty of it. It's Cascade 220, so it's worsted weight, 5 stitches to the inch. I've got 6 skeins, I think, so it's plenty for a full sweater for me. So I think that's what I'm going to use. And I wouldn't call this pink. I would call this magenta. It's definitely on the purple side of that whole spectrum. And I really like it. I tend to find myself gravitating towards, the one sweater notwithstanding, I find that I often want to wear dark or like dark bright colors. I just think that, you know, that works well with my skin tone and everything. So that's my plan, is to use this yarn to make the Reflection sweater. I have obviously a lot of plans here. I have to finish another sweater for myself, plus I'm planning 2 more, plus some for my nieces, which are pretty fine gauge, even though they're smaller people. So we will see how much gets done. I think I might at least try to start everything so that I've got those in progress. But yeah, that's gonna be fun. That's a lot of plans though. I have one more thing to share. It's not knitting. It's sewing. And it's just for the sake of showing you what I have done. I've been on a whole streak of making pajama pants. I'm using that Luna pattern from Made by Ray. And I'm on a roll. So I'm just gonna keep going until I get tired of it or run out of fabric or we have enough. But here's another pair that I made for my daughter. I might have shown off the fabric before, but I definitely did not have these made the last time that I made a video. So these are kind of thick flannel. I don't think she's going to be wearing them soon. You know, we've got highs hitting the 90s again this week. But if you look real close at the fabric, you can see you can see that. It's like a fine herringbone kind of pattern. And then there's this rainbow plaid situation kind of going through, which she really, really liked. And I got the fabric at Joann's. Our Joann's is in such a sad state. They're understaffed and everything's a mess, but sometimes you can find really nice kind of heavyweight flannel plaid. So I got this there. It took a while to cut out because I was trying to be very, very careful to match up the plaid, not only to make sure that the, that the lines were lining up, but I was trying to get the colors to match up too. And I have to say, I did a really good job. Look at this. This is like the back seam. I did a really good job there. Did I do as good a job on the sides? Not quite, but it's not bad. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. You don't really see a big break, right? And on the inseam, the colors didn't match. I think there was just not a way to get everything to match exactly. I mean, I got the lines to match up pretty closely, but not necessarily the colors. When you look at it, there's actually quite a big color repeat when you consider how many different colors in the spectrum are being worked through or striped through. I don't know how you say it. Woven through, I guess. But I'm pretty happy with it. So cutting it out meant that instead of cutting out 2 pieces at once, so if you don't have to worry about matching patterns, normally, if you're cutting out legs of a pair of pants, you can just have the fabric folded in a double layer and cut out both of the back pieces at once and both of the front pieces at once. But for this, I had to do one at a time, and I had the notches marked, and I was being very, very careful about matching it up. And I even took the first piece I cut out, laying it over the fabric that was left and trying to maneuver it so that it looked like it disappeared. And then I knew that they were identical, that the pattern matching was identical. It was a whole thing, but it worked out pretty well. And I am very happy with how these turned out, and so is she. I'm not gonna grab it now, but I have one more pair cut out for her in kind of a big scale plaid, like different blues. And then I have a pair for myself cut out that has a fun like bicycle themed print on it. So when I get those sewed up, I will show you, but who knows when that'll happen, because I have a lot of other stuff to make and to do. So that's all I have for today. Thanks for sticking with me this long. I will see you sometime, hopefully later in July, and bye for now.